Hey guys, this is Brittany. I know that I told everybody that I was going to make a video on breastfeeding and pumping, how to build your supply, maintain your supply, / increase your supply, and then also when you go back to work, how to incorporate pumping into your work schedule. So I'm probably going to split this up into 3 videos. I'm going to do one on building, and then one on maintaining while you're on maternity leave, and then one on after maternity leave while you're at work. So right now I'm just filming on an iPad. I don't have like a really fancy vlogging camera or anything. I'm just filming on an iPad, and my husband is out there watching my little girl, so if she screams or if I have to stop, I'm sorry. I'm currently in my nursery, so this is just her nursery chair and her closet you can see behind me. So anyway, so let's get started. So I want to first talk about when you're in the hospital. I was a first-time mom. I didn't know anything about pumping, anything about nursing, anything about breastfeeding. I actually went into the whole process thinking that it wasn't going to work out for me. I thought I just heard too many horror stories, or too many moms say like, oh, it was the worst thing, or oh, it was so painful, I had to stop, or my milk didn't come in, and just so many people that were unsuccessful with it that I figured I was going to be unsuccessful as well. So when I first had her and it came time where the nurse was like, okay, like we're gonna try nursing her, I literally freaked out. Like I was having like a mini anxiety panic attack. I was like, I don't know anything about this. I really don't know if I want to try this or not. Like I knew I wanted to, but I just had so much anxiety about it not working out that I just was so unsure about all of it. So when I was in the hospital, the nurses got me started on pumping because they didn't think Everly at first was getting enough food to eat. So they asked me if I wanted to start pumping so that I could give that to her in a bottle so we could ensure that she was getting a certain amount of food. Now, granted, I had a C-section, so I was in the hospital for 5 days. So I had time to kind of figure this out, ask a lot of questions. It wasn't just like I had her the next day. I just had to leave. So when I was in the hospital, they said, well, we'll bring you pumping supplies and whatnot. And then that's really when I got to figure out a lot about pumping. I asked a ton of questions on like freezing, building supply, doing a freezer stash, kind of like, all the tips and tricks about breastfeeding. I was there for 5 days, so I really got to learn a lot about it. So the first thing I want to say is, if you have not had your baby yet, or if you are not used to pumping, I would suggest bringing your pump to the hospital with you, because this here, you're going to be able to ask some questions on how to use it. You're going to be able to figure it out, and you can actually use your pump at the hospital, and it's going to be conducive to you. And if you don't bring your pump to the hospital, you can still pump there. They will give you a kit that will actually plug into the pumping system that they have there, and then you can pump there as well. Also, do not throw those kits away, because I had an Amita kit at the hospital, but I have a Medela pump, and when I got home I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to use this. I guess I'll just have to throw it away. It's not going to work. No, you can unplug the tubing and you can hook up different other types of like the flanges and the bottles and stuff to your pump. So you can still use those, so don't throw those away. So also one thing that kind of surprised me when I first got in the hospital was the fact that my milk wasn't in yet, but they were allowing me to pump. So I was actually pumping colostrum. Like I was pumping it and they were allowing me to give that to her. And I asked them, I said, well, what can I do with what she's not eating? And they said, well, you can just freeze it. So I thought, okay. So this was kind of like my first introduction to like pumping, nursing, all of this stuff. So that's how I got started on pumping. I don't know how I would have ever actually broken out my pump for myself if I didn't have the help at the hospital and figure out how to do it there before I came home. So I started pumping in the hospital. I just would pump whenever I felt like before she was going to eat, because I would nurse her for a little bit and then feed her some of the bottle just to make sure she was getting enough. So that's kind of how I got introduced to pumping. So when I came home, like the next, I would say, like, it was like a day after I came home because I was there for 5 days. So my milk really came in like a day after I got home. And that is when I've heard two different things. I've heard don't pump when your milk comes in because you're going to have an oversupply and it's going to just be so much you're not going to know what to do with it yourself. You're always going to be engorged. And I also heard only pump for comfort. Pump until you feel like you're comfortable and then don't pump anymore. So I had kind of two different things to go off of, and I actually asked her doctor that day when we went to the hospital. I asked her during her checkup, should I be pumping, should I not? And he actually advised that I'd not pump, I only pump for comfort. So I kind of got to thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I know that I'm going to want to breastfeed. I know that I'm going to want her drinking breast milk for even long after I stop nursing if possible. So I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go for it. So while my milk supply was coming in, I pumped and stored. I pumped and stored because she slept so much that I could not feed her often enough, and I would get so engorged and I would have to pump. So instead of pumping just for a brief moment and storing it, I would pump until I just felt like, okay, I'm done sitting here pumping, I guess. Because at first it takes a long time. You kind of sit there and you're like, okay, this is taking forever. And I would just pump and store it. And so I started pumping and storing it when my milk came in. Now, if you're afraid to do this when your milk first comes in, that's okay because you can just leave it in the fridge. Like I did that too. Like if I was like, well, I don't know if she's gonna get hungry later. I might not be full enough to feed her. Like you can leave it in the fridge. And when I would decide like, oh, within the next few hours, like I'll be able to feed her or I'll be able to pump again, give her that to eat as a bottle or whatever, then I would store it when I knew that she was gonna be like okay for the day. Like don't think that I was like starving her by saying like, oh, I'm gonna pump and like store everything and like not feed her. No, she's not my number one priority. I made sure she was like well fed. If you have seen her, she has rolls for days. This kid has rolls, so you know that she's not skipping a meal, and I'm not depriving her of anything by building this freezer stash up. So that is my first like introduction to pumping. Also, I don't think, honestly, I don't think oversupply is a bad thing. Like, I would say that I have an oversupply. I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, if you are deathly afraid of an oversupply, then I wouldn't suggest pumping while your milk is coming in. But if you're like me and you're like, I'm going to be home for 3 months, I'll be able to deal with it and I'll be able to figure it out, then go for it. Go for it. So I'm going to stop this video here and I'm going to do a second video on how to build and increase your supply while you're on your maternity leave or just when you're at home if you're a stay-at-home mom, and just like foods and things to eat that might help you increase your supply. Alright?